Hi, Year 11s. I'm just going to talk you through the activities that I'm setting for you for the next week. It's the same activity for each lesson, and I want you guys to do it 4 times. Basically, it's on quote analysis and then paragraph writing. And the reason why we're going to keep repeating it is because we've got multiple themes, and quote analysis and paragraph writing is the fundamentals of English, pretty much. For everything in English, any assumption that you write about or any claim that you are making, you need to have sufficient evidence to back up your point of view. That's something I think you guys have been learning since year 7, that when you say something in a paragraph, you need to provide evidence. This was the same thing for your oral presentations. This was the same thing in your argument analysis. And then you need to be analyzing that quote. You need to say, what does this quote or example highlight about the theme? And that's what you need to be writing in your essays. And it was similar in your argument analysis. We always asked for the impact of a particular quote. What is that quote trying to do? What is that language trying to do? So this is the activity that I've set for you guys. You've got a theme per lesson, and we're going to go through 4 themes. That's not to say there are other themes out there, but that's just what we are going to cover. And then I've asked you to select 3 quotes or examples and fill in this table. What does this quote or example highlight about the key theme? Then I have asked you to write down what Rose's main message of the key theme is, and what are the sub-ideas and sub-questions of this theme. And I'm going to show you what I mean. And I've said here, consider the causes, the challenges, and the consequences of this theme. Okay, I'm going to run you through how I've done it, and I'll scroll up. And it actually took me the last hour and a bit to do it myself. So what I'm saying is that it takes time. Analysis takes time, and initially it will take a lot of time because you've got to build up your quote bank and quotes you are comfortable using. But then once you've done the hard work now, when it comes to writing essays, you can reuse all of this and know exactly what you are trying to say and reuse some of these sentences that you have created in your paragraphs. Okay, so it's taken me a while as well, and it will take you a while initially, but with practice, we will get quicker and quicker. Okay, so the quote, the theme that we're going to be looking at first, and I think it's the plan for you guys in your lesson, is on prejudice. But I think I am going to look at justice and the jury system as one of the key themes. Okay. I have asked you to select 3 quotes that highlight something important about this theme. So what I've done is I've gone to the story and I've tried to pick out quotes that I feel like are saying something about justice and the jury system. Now, you don't need to go straight to the book. You can actually use your student notes, your 12 Angry Men student notes, as well as the double entry journal that you've taken time to fill out as well. Okay, so there are heaps of resources. There is also the following. There is the TSSM resource study guide, and then there is PowerPoints in your resources that further include information. So you've got plenty of resources to help you find these quotes. The quotes I ended up finding was this one. Juror 2 says, I just think he's guilty. I thought it was obvious from the word go. I mean, nobody proved otherwise. To which Juror 8 says, nobody has to prove otherwise. The burden of proof is on the prosecution. The defendant doesn't have to open his mouth. So I thought it highlighted something about the role of the jury system and the role of justice and what justice is about, and I'll explain that further a bit later. My next quote I found was, I'm not trying to change your mind. It's just that we're talking about someone's life here. I mean, we can't decide that in 5 minutes, supposing we're wrong. To which the seventh juror replies, suppose we're wrong. Suppose this whole building fell on my head. You can suppose anything. And juror 8 says, that's right. And the last quote that I found, little passage thing, is when they were talking about motive. And then juror 8 said, that's right, they heard the father hit the boy twice, that's meant to be twice, and finally they saw the boy walk angrily out of the house. What does that prove? The 6 said, it doesn't exactly prove anything, it's just part of the picture. 8 says, you said it revealed a motive for the killing. I can't see 2 slaps in the face provoking him into committing murder. And 4th juror says, it may have been 2 slaps too many. So in all of these examples, it's about the idea of what is the truth, and how do we get there. And that's why I thought it was fundamental to this theme of justice. So with this first quote, where juror 8 says the burden, nobody has to prove otherwise, the burden of proof is on the prosecution, you guys are now meant to analyze, and you're meant to say, what does this quote or example highlight about the key theme? And this is the analysis I've done. I've said Rose highlights the presumption people tend to make on an accused, more so if the accused is from a minority group or from a poor socioeconomic area. And juror 8 reasserts the idea that the defendant doesn't need to prove his innocence, and that in a democracy this premise must be assumed. He invites the other jurors to reconsider if this premise was upheld in their minds. Because basically juror 2 said it was obvious, and juror 8 is trying to say, well, it's not so obvious unless you have proof, because we actually need to prove it. The burden of proof is on the prosecution. We have to assume that the accused is innocent. Okay, so for this next quote, where juror 7 says, suppose this whole building fell on my head, you can suppose anything. Juror 8 says, that's right. Juror 8 invites the audience and the jurors to address, this is meant to be to consider other possible causes and consequences of a situation rather than accepting without proof the narrative presented in court. The need to know the truth beyond doubt is reiterated by juror 8. So juror 7 says, why are you trying to explore all these possibilities? You could explore any sort of possibility. And juror 8 is trying to say, that's right, because without proof, any possibility is on the cards. Especially in a justice system. And as a jury member, it's our responsibility to consider all of these possibilities until we find proof. The last quote here that I've analysed about juror 6 and then juror 4 saying it may have been 2 slaps too many, everyone has a breaking point. I've said here, juror 6 here presents details of the story that potentially reveal a motive for the killing. Yet juror 8 reminds his fellow jurors and audience to question any assumption made of the accused. So again, it's about questioning assumptions and asserts again the need for proof. Similarly, juror 4 also invites juror 8 and the other fellow jurors to consider the idea that the presented narrative may indeed also be the truth. Through this counter, Rose again reinforces the idea that whichever argument is presented, proof is still required beyond reasonable doubt. So, guys, once I have analysed these 3 quotes, I need to look for a pattern, because that pattern is going to tell me what the message is. Now, you might have already picked this up, but I'm sure you guys can see that all these quotes are showing us that proof is required, and that jurors are meant to be questioning each other, to consider all possible causes rather than accepting without proof. So I'll highlight that, and that in a democracy, innocence must be presumed. So you can see how this word proof is coming up. Prove his innocence. Proof. And then proof is required beyond reasonable doubt. So that is what seems to be the consistent pattern about this idea of justice and the jury system. So when you then answer, what is Rose's main message about this key theme? I've written justice is based on truth, evidence, and proof, because that's what came out in my analysis. In the quotes that I've selected, that's what was the consistent message here. And then I've asked, what are the sub-ideas? So sub-ideas are still, it's still about the main idea of justice, but when I say consider the causes, challenges, or consequences, it's more considering like how can justice happen? Or what is the role of the jury members? Or what is the cause of justice? What is the consequence of justice? What are the challenges that justice presents? And so I really found two other sub-ideas to come from challenges, because the challenge in this whole play is that it is the job of the jury to question assumed narratives. In this one, Juror 2 says it's obvious, but Juror 8 says, actually, it's not so obvious. So Juror 8 is questioning the narrative. Juror 7 is saying, well, yeah, you can suppose anything. And Juror 8 again kind of questions him and counters him and says, yeah, you're actually meant to suppose everything. And here, Juror 6 is saying, like, the fact that the dad slapped Juror 8 in the face twice proves proves a good motive. Juror 8 says, well, it doesn't really. And then Juror 4 actually says, but it could. So it seems here that actually Rose is saying that the job of the jury is to keep questioning each other and question one another until proof is reached. So that's why I've said it is the job of the jury to to question assumed narratives until they arrive at the truth. And it is the premise of democracy that the accused is assumed to be innocent. That is really important in this play, that because they're in a democracy, the accused is innocent. If it was in a totalitarian dictatorship, anything could happen to them and justice would be not there. But because this is a democracy and justice, the foundation of democracy is meant to be justice, we need to be assuming that people are innocent until proof is given. So that's what I've done here. My next job is to write it into a paragraph. And in my next video, I'll kind of explain this paragraph, but for now, I'll just read it out. So the question is, what does Rose assert about justice and the jury system? And so this is my response based on all the quotes and analysis I've done above. And you will start to notice that I have reused bits and pieces. So I've said here, Rose highlights the idea that proven and evident truth is fundamental for justice to be present. That was my big idea here. The jurors frequently present assumptions disguised as widely held truths. Juror 2 claims it was obvious from the word go and that nobody proved otherwise, to which Juror 8 counters the burden of proof is on the prosecution. Rose, through Juror 8, asserts the idea that a key premise of democracy is the presumption of innocence rather than guilt, and the obvious guilt perceived by Juror 2 is to be dismissed unless sufficient evidence is given. Rose goes on to further explicate the notion that jury members bear the solemn responsibility in a democracy to consider all possibilities until proven evidence reveals itself. I think I am going to run out of time, but you've got the paragraph with you, and I'm also going to further explain it in the next video. Okay.